Hello everyone, my name is Brian Zhu. I am a sophomore from Saratoga High School. So today we'll be talking about American popular music. So a little bit about myself. I am from California, near San Francisco. I'm a 10th grader. Parents are from Tianjin. I taught English at China last summer. I do both speech and debate. I have placed, which means I won an award in LD debate, humorous speech, and dual speech. I've also taught at a speech academy, bringing 4 students to finals with 1 first and 1 second place student. And I was the head teacher of a group of high schoolers at that academy. All right, so if you want to contact me, you could do so by any of the following methods. So by email, twtchina@yahoo.com, by phone, 559-598-7083, or by my website, which is down below. If you want to copy any of this, you can ask for it a little later, or you can try copying it right now. Yeah. All right, so moving on. So the overview of what we'll be going over today. So we'll first go over the popular types of music in the United States. So like what's the most popular in the United States? Then we'll go over the origins of these sorts of popular music. Then we'll go over jazz music, some famous jazz artists. Go to country, then rock. Then we'll talk a little bit about Elvis, who was the most famous rock musician, most likely. We'll go over pop music. Then we'll go to R&B, rap, hip-hop artists, effects of music, and then finally we'll go over some examples. So I'd really like to stress that pop music is not popular music. Well, it's not. Basically, popular music is like what American citizens listen to, but pop music is a specific genre inside popular music. All right, moving on. So what is the most popular type of music in the United States? So the rock and the oldies, blues, folk, rock, punk, metal, and rap and hip-hop genres seem to have the most universal appeal according to the All-American Music Map, which is down below, which is based on data from the National Endowment of the Arts, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis through the Martin Prosperity Institute, and state-level music preferences from Wikipedia. There's also a full breakdown of music preferences by city, and also for the first time ever, hip-hop has surpassed rock as the most dominant music in 2018. So the chart down below is from 2016, so the statistics are a little bit off, but this is like a general trend of what it's like. It hasn't really changed that much, except hip-hop is now over rock. So as we see, 3 big ones, rock, which is 29.41%, hip-hop, 21.57%, and pop, 18.63%. So these are the 3 main genres that people listen to in America right now. So the sources of popular music. So every aspect of popular music today is regarded as American has sprung from imported traditions. So basically, every single form of music that we listen to today, all types of popular music, has come from some other tradition or some sort of smaller tradition. So these sources may be classified into 3 broad streams: European American music, African American music, and Latin American music. So each of these is made up of many styles of music, and each has a profoundly different influence the other ones. So what this basically means is that American popular music comes from many different forms. But the 3 main ones that come from are from these 3. So the type of American popular music that we have now will most likely combine these 3 or mix it in some way. So crossing cultural boundaries. So during the 1980s, the boundary between mainstream and marginal music has become ever fuzzier, and pressures to expand the global market for American popular music and create new alternative genres and audiences within the American market grew ever stronger. One result of these processes was the emergence of a category called world music. The term was adopted in the late 1980s by independent record label owners and concert promoters, entering the marketplace as a replacement for long-standing categories such as traditional music, international music, and ethnic music. So basically what this means is that before the 1980s, we would have these sort of things called traditional music, international music, and ethnic music, or basically music for one specific religion or one specific type of ethnicity, or one specific type of culture. But then after the 1980s, the sort of culture music became incorporated in sorts of modern day American music. So basically they can no longer have this sort of thing called traditional music, international music, or ethnic music, because American popular music already uses so many different types of these ethnic music inside, like they get blended into the sort of popular music. All right, so now jazz. So jazz music was the anthem for the first well-defined American youth culture. So rebelling against the horrors of mechanized warfare and the straight-laced morality of the 19th century, millions of college-age Americans adopted jazz as a way to mark the difference from their parents' generation. Jazz started in New Orleans at around 1900. Jazz is a hybrid genre of music combining ragtime, marching band rhythms, and a cultural music from all around the world. So again, all types of American popular music has used different cultures' music as well. It is based on riffs or repeated patterns, and is heavily emphasizes the rhythms. Jazz also highly encourages improvisation or coming up with music on the spot. Jazz then inspired different branches such as swing, bebop, cool jazz, and fusion. So as a general summary, jazz, the main important thing is that it combines different cultures, but it focuses mainly on the rhythm and instrumentation, or the playing of instruments. So basically, it also had improvisation, or musicians would come up with music on the spot. So that basically, as you can see, jazz heavily emphasizes using music or different instruments and rhythm. So this is a typical jazz band. You have the trumpet or the horn in the back. You have the saxophone. You have the cello player, the drums, and then of course you have the piano. So some very famous jazz artists. So Louis Armstrong is possibly one of the most well-known jazz singers and trumpeters. He is credited with making jazz a rhythmical type of music. He also advocated to have each instrument have a solo. So what this means is that Louis Armstrong was one of the front runners. He basically said that jazz should be very rhythmical. It should be focusing mainly on the different types of rhythms you can incorporate. And he also claimed that each musician, each instrument should have a solo in the piece. So basically, instead of having every single musician play over each other and incorporate each other, like intertwined, he argued that every single time in music, one instrument should stand out over the others, and each instrument should have a chance to do this. By 1930, he was one of the most well-known musicians in the world. He is known to have wanted some improvisation, but couldn't deviate too much from the actual melody. So what this means is that Louis Armstrong, he wanted people to improvise, but he didn't want them to improvise too much. So if people improvise to the point that you couldn't tell what the original music sounded like, it would be bad. But if you improvise just a little bit to make the original music sound better, or add a bit of instrumental ornaments or things on the end to make it sound better, you could do that, as long as it doesn't change the overall melody of the original song. Another famous pianist is named Duke Ellington. So he's credited with starting quote-unquote jungle music, or music with very dense and heavy textures. So basically, Duke Ellington, unlike Louis Armstrong, basically emphasized people to play over each other, to incorporate everyone together, to make everyone sound together. So he would experiment with different harmonies and rhythms, and he created unusual pieces with complex parts. So now we're going to country. So country music has always been about the relationship between the countryside and the city, home and migration, the past and the present. This is not surprising if we consider the main audience of this music during the 1920s. They were rural people whose way of life was being radically transformed by the mechanization of agriculture and change in the American society, and migrants who left home to find jobs and establish new lives in the city. So these songs are mostly focused on love, family, and home. So in a way, country is very much like the European American version of R&B. So R&B is for African Americans. We'll talk about that in a later slide. But just know that country and R&B are very much alike. There were crooners who sang love songs, more pop-oriented singers, and religious country singers. They mostly used an acoustic guitar in their voice. So Johnny Cash is one of the most famous country singers. He mostly sang songs of sorrow, and he became known for performing in all black. But his songs eventually became about redemption and being better in life, which is a standard example of what all country songs are basically about. So acoustic guitar is up there in case you ever want to know what it looks like. So this is Blake Shelton, a very famous country singer right now. As you can see, his voice, he's singing, and his his acoustic guitar. So rock and roll. The rise of rock and roll in the mid-1950s transformed the landscape of American popular music, further cementing the popularity of Southern-derived styles, ultimately derived from the blues and country music. If you were young and in the 1950s in the United States, no matter where you lived, no matter what your race or class, rock and roll was your music. So rock is centered around the electric guitar with fast riffs, or as I stated before, the types of repeating rhythms, and solos for each instrument. So lyrics are usually centered around love, but they can also have social or political themes. So rock serves as one of the most major influences for all the music that we hear nowadays. So the type of American popular music that we hear right now is heavily influenced by rock. Though rock and roll became extremely influential, we have to remember that rock was not necessarily new. It was also not the first genre to mix black and white music. So basically, a lot of people say that rock became famous because it was a type of new genre that young people could relate to, and it also mixed black and white music, which allowed young people to relate more. But this is not true because there were genres that mixed black and white music before, and rock was not a new genre. It just became famous really suddenly because of most likely the way that people perceived it. The young generation liked this type of rock music. Um, so again, rock basically combines different types of music. So it combined R&B, country, and blues, which is pretty important because it combined three of the most important ones and most important genres before rock into one main genre. So this is probably one of the more important reasons why rock became famous. So this is a typical rock band. You have the electric guitar, the bass guitar, the singer, and the drums. That is typical of most basic rock bands. So Elvis Presley, the biggest rock and roll star to come from a countryside of the music world was Elvis Presley. So again, rock drew many influences from country, R&B, jazz. So Elvis was from the countryside of things. In 1955, RCA Victor, a major label, set about trying to turn the hillbilly cat into a mainstream performer without compromising the strength of his appeal to teenagers. They succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Presley's extraordinary popularity established rock and roll as an unprecedented mass market phenomenon. His reputation as a performer and recording artist endured up to his death in 1977. Unfortunately, he died at the age of 42 and continues beyond the grave. So I'll Never Stand Your Way is Elvis's first known recording. The king of rock and roll, or Elvis, holds records for the most top 40 and top 10 hits, and the most consecutive number one hits, and the most weeks at number one on Billboard top charts. So in case if you didn't know, Billboard is basically a sort of a ranking system in the United States for popular American songs that are coming out. So he was number one in a lot of these different categories on the Billboard top charts. Now we'll go to pop music. So pop music is another genre of music, and as I stated before, remember that pop music is not necessarily popular music, it's a genre of music. So pop music is another genre of music. It takes elements from many other different genres of music. So many of the artists mentioned in this lesson have also made pop songs. Basically because pop music is so broad, like in what they define as pop music, a lot of the artists that we've already mentioned so far have possibly made pop songs. So the main element in a pop song is singing. So it is almost in a chorus-verse structure with a hook. So they usually have one repeated chorus and many different verses throughout. Pop is also usually focused around love, and there are barely any exceptions in this type of theme. Pop is usually very simple with quick beats and repeating melodies. Pop is also very vague because it draws on many different influences. So pop will usually mirror the style of the most popular genre of music when it comes out. So for instance, pop right now has elements of hip hop and rock, while before it could have had elements of rock only. So the most famous pop musician right now of ever basically is Michael Jackson. So this is a typical pop concert. As you can see, it's very modern with smartphones and everything. Now we're going to R&B, rhythm and blues. Genre came to be known as a loose cluster of styles rooted in Southern folk traditions and shaped by the experiences of returning military personnel and hundreds of thousands of Black Americans who had migrated to urban centers such as New York, Chicago, Detroit, and Los Angeles during and just after World War II. So R&B served as a transition between jazz and rock, as it focused mainly on lyrics rather than improvising. This music was heavily grounded in African American culture, and its topics would be about success, love, and religion. So doo-wop branched off of R&B, and it focused mainly on the religious aspect of our lives. Soul focused more on the good times of life, and funk was even more about this type of good times, about being more light, more fun. So again, R&B is, as you can see, is very similar to country music. So it is more of the African American side of things, while country is more for the European Americans. So this is a typical R&B group. Most of them are singing. This is most likely doo-wop because they're all singing. There's probably one pianist in the back or a drummer. Now rap. Of all genres of popular music, none has spurred more vigorous public debate than rap music. Rapping is speaking or singing to a beat. So it usually needs rhyme, but it also heavily emphasizes flowing. So basically, people need to be able to, it has to be able to flow so that you can't really see when they're stopping, but the ideas just keep coming at you. Rapping can take many different views, but not all of them are about change or social views. While some of these perspectives tell us something about the history and significance of rap music or different types of cultural oppression, others are more modern, talking about parties, dance, and relationships. So as I give a warning right now, rap is very different from hip hop. It's different. It's not very different, but it's different from hip hop. So for instance, rap could be like a club song, something people dance to. It's about like love, about having money, about having friends, about friendship. But rap is a part of hip hop. So for a rap song to be basically called hip hop, it has to have a message. It has to talk about social change. It has to talk about how they're being oppressed. It has to talk about what something is doing wrong or what someone is doing wrong. So this is a very famous rap musician right now. His name is Kendrick Lamar. I'm sure some of you have heard of him. So hip hop. Hip hop is a culture that encompasses rap, R&B, and generally any other form of music that has influences to create change or point out a social issue. So rap has been characterized as a vital link in the centuries-old chain of cultural and musical connections between Africa and the Americas, as an authentic voice of an oppressed urban underclass, and as a form that exploits long-standing stereotypes of Black people. So hip hop uses all these forms to create music and inspire change. So another form of hip hop that we can't talk about because it's not music is breakdancing. So basically, hip hop is a sort of culture that African Americans have used to basically express desires for change or their pain of being oppressed throughout many generations. So hip hop includes all these different things, and rap is probably the most famous form of hip hop, which has to spur some sort of political change or shed light on a problem. So this is breakdancing, and as you can see, has mainly rooted in African American culture. So some very famous hip hop artists. So most famous hip hop artists come from the mid 1980s to the mid 1990s. This is known as the golden age because this is when most rap was focused on political issues. So Nas is known to be the best lyricist because his lyrics would flow and they were often double meanings. So why he was called a great lyricist was because you couldn't really tell when his raps would stop or when he was trying to stop talking because it would just keep going. His voice would just flow over every single beat. He wouldn't stop. It didn't sound like he ever stopped. And his lyrics had double meanings. So you had to think about them. You had to understand what he was trying to get across, his message. He was essentially creating a guideline to what high quality raps are. Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls both expanded these types of songs. They both created more and more music based off of this genre. Based off this type of formula of good rap music. Both became known as the best rapper in the West and East, respectively. So basically, Tupac Shakur was known as the best rapper in the West, while Biggie Smalls was known as the best rapper in the East. There was also gangster rap, which focused mainly on violent acts witnessed every day in the inner city. So Eazy-E is often regarded as the father of gangster rap. While rap is now becoming more popular, it has also become to take elements from pop. So rap is becoming to have more repetition, with the success of a rap song being less focused on lyrics, but more on how catchy the beat is. So what the last sentence means is that we are basically going away from the golden age of hip-hop because we're no longer talking about social issues. Instead, we're being more influenced by pop because it is having more recurring themes. It's just more about how catchy the tune is, how people can sing to it, about modern-day life, about how how rich you are. All those types of things are what most hip hop artists focus on now. So it's not really hip hop; it's mostly rap. So a couple of pictures we have on top. On top we have Eazy-E, which is father of gangster rap, and Biggie Smalls, who is the best rapper, who is thought of as the best rapper of the East. So the effect of music. So popular music both shaped and reflected American culture throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. This period saw the birth of minstrelsy, the first distinctive American form of popular culture, the rise of modern music industry, and the rapid audience expansion, not least because new technologies enabled the dissemination of music to national audiences. Some of the songs and dance music styles that emerged would influence profoundly U.S. popular music throughout the 20th century. So music has many benefits as well. For instance, it's a very good mood regulator as it disconnects our listener from the world for some time, so we feel at peace when we're listening to music. However, music also impacts our beliefs. So a lot of views on the world, a lot of our own views on the world, political views, are impacted by music. By listening to an artist's art, or in this case music, we're influenced by their thoughts. We start thinking how they're thinking. We start thinking how they would think on different types of things. So what this basically means is that popular music was basically shaped American culture as we know it, because popular music, as we've seen throughout in the very last sentence, basically influences how people think, political thoughts, all these different things. And because America is very much about democracy, we can see that a lot of American culture has been impacted by this sort of music. So now on to a couple examples of songs. All right, so I'm sure you guys have all listened to the songs. So let's go over a couple of the very important ones. So first off, with the rock song Elvis, Jailhouse Rock. So you could hear the sort of beat or the type of music that really made rock popular. It was a danceable tune. It was catchy, and you could hear the guitar in the background. Elvis's singing was pretty simple, but it was catchy. So again, rock basically took in different cultures, different types of genres, and mashed into one. So you could hear a bit of like jazz in the background. You could hear like the type of music he had, kind of country. You could hear like how he was singing it, and basically he basically took everything and put it into one sort of danceable tune. The second form of music, Queen, is a band. It's a rock band. They created Bohemian Rhapsody, probably one of their more famous songs. As you can hear throughout the song, it starts off very quiet, very sad, very solemn. But it's sort of like the sort of more focusing on the jazzy aspect of things, with just a little bit of music input played, with a little bit of singing, but mostly focusing on like the different chords they used. But then later on, they start getting more and more loud, right? So that's like the sort of rock music where they sort of incorporate everything in the very end. Then we go into pop music, where we have Beyonce, which is a very famous pop singer with her song Halo. As you can hear in the background, there's a simple repeating bass with the most focus on her voice, on how she was singing. So we could tell that is like the basic of pop music, where it's a basic beat, which is repeated throughout with the emphasis on good singing voice. And then we went on to Michael Jackson's Billie Jean, probably his most famous song, again, which had a very simple synth bass in the background, which was repeated. And then the main focus was on the danceability of the tune, a simple tune, but again, very, very catchy. Then we went on to jazz. Louis Armstrong, again, who is known as a trumpeter and as a singer. His most famous song, What a Wonderful World, which is still very played today, is more of his singing aspect, where you could hear some of the musical aspects of jazz in the background with the different instruments, but the main focus was on his voice, which is not as highlighted, but instead it was sort of more of a sort of incorporated into the music, where it was embellished by the different music in the background. The second one by Duke Ellington, Take the A Train, was more of what stereotypically we think of as jazz, because it had all the different types of music, it had all the different instruments played together, interplayed, and then each one would have a solo, each one would have a main focus. So that is basically what jazz is, with different instruments playing together and different solos. Then we went into country with Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire. We could hear that it was a sad song. It was about how he fell in love, all these different things. Again, country themes, and you hear the guitar in the background. You hear like the Spanish origins from it. Again, Latin American, European American sort of things became in country, and you could hear basically his voice with the sort of southern drawl that a lot of country singers have. Then we went to hip hop, Tupac, Keep Your Head Up, which we listened to, which has a sort of deeper meaning. So again, Tupac, the bass and the beat in the background was pretty simple, but the main focus was on his sort of flow, the lyricism inside of it, where we learned about how he's basically speaking on the oppression of African American ladies inside culture, of women, basically. So again, hip hop needs a sort of message. Nas, one of the best lyricists, you hear how his rapping just flowed throughout the entire beat. If I Rule the World, again, about oppression inside today's society. So hip hop needs a message. So that's basically everything. So let's go over everything once again. So let's look at the very beginning. We start off by saying what is popular music right now, which we found were three main things, which were hip hop, rock, followed by pop. So those are the three main genres right now which are popular. So then we went into more detail. We talked about how popular music incorporates many different cultures, but mainly European American music, African American music, and Latin American music. Then we went on to jazz, which we found is mostly instrumental, about improvisation, and it has to have repeated riffs. And you also can have solos in between the pieces, and also you should have some singing. This also had jazz artists, famous jazz artists, Duke Ellington, which you listened to, and Louis Armstrong. Then we went on to country, which was more about the relationship between the countryside and city, about home. So this was more of sad songs about religion, sort of the European American version of R&B. They used acoustic guitars, and then we listened to Johnny Cash, one of the more famous country singers. Then we went on to rock and roll. Again, it became very famous because it incorporated jazz, R&B, and country. So this is very important because rock still has influence today. So you could hear the bands in the background, the very loud noises, the sort of cacophony that became very famous with rock, and also the different types of beats that also became very famous. We listened to two very famous songs, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, and we listened to Elvis, Jailhouse Rock. So again, those two are very staple for what artists are like inside the rock genre. Then we went on to pop music, where we listened to Michael Jackson, who is probably the most famous pop musician ever, and Beyonce, who is also very famous. They both had simple beats in the background, but focused mostly on the singing style. Then we went on to hip hop, R&B, and rap. So we didn't really listen to any R&B songs, but R&B is basically like country. So just remember that it's like the African American version of country, because it also talks about sort of oppression and all the cultural struggles that people have to go through about religion. Rap we listen to rap is more about speaking throughout the beat. Remember, rap is different from hip hop because hip hop has to have a message, while rap can just be rapping about anything. We listened to two hip hop artists, Tupac and Nas, who both talked about very deep, important underlying issues in today's society. Finally, we have to remember the effect of music, where it actually affects our own political beliefs, which in turn affects the 21st century and basically how things work. So that's basically everything. And just remember that if you ever need any help, you can contact me on basically three different ways, which are email, phone, or website. All three are up here. If you have any questions, be sure to give me a call, email me, or you can come to my website, drop by. So that should be all. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.